In the movie The Pursuit of Happiness, Chris Gardner, which was played by Will Smith, was a traveling salesman. Uh, he just simply wanted to make a better life for himself and his son. In this particular scene of the movie, Will had an interview with some managers of this very prestigious internship. I guess it can be a prestigious internship. However, if he got this job financially, this would mean a lot. He could provide a better life for his son, so all would be well. However, in this interview, mind you that prior to the interview, he had a mishap and had paint all over his clothes. So that was one issue even before he got there. So in the interview, we'll use the challenges of his life to actually, create a scenario where he used persuasive speaking to actually persuade these guys to hire him, which leads us to today's lesson. We're going to be talking about the art of persuasive speaking, and our objectives today is to understand the elements of persuasive speaking, and we're going to be talking about some elements of persuasive speaking. Three of those elements. The first one is ethos, pathos, and logos, and we're going to actually use this scene from this movie, and we're going to use Will's interview to actually help us to understand these elements and to perhaps give us some more understanding of how they work, what they are. We'll talk a little bit about the definitions of them, and as we get more into the lesson. So in this interview, Will, again, he used the challenges of his life, and the first element that we're going to talk about is ethos. And ethos is talks about the credibility of a person, and how we can use elements of our credibility to actually draw our audience in, or whoever we're speaking to. So we'll use this credibility element in this way. He used words like his work ethic to these guys. He also talked about his background and how he was a hard worker, and he wanted to use that hard work to drive him, and as he appealed to these managers to hire him. So another element that Will used in this interview was pathos, and pathos talks about how we use emotional appeal to draw our audience in, and to make a emotional appeal to our audience. Will, he used words like his dedication, and how he wanted to make a better life for his son, and he wanted to provide a better life for his sons, which actually created respect for him. These guys actually, I would think that this created some respect for him. The next element that we're going to talk about is logos. Again, I mentioned that Will had a mishap right before the interview, and he walked in with paint all over himself. Can you imagine somebody coming in to an interview and they have paint all over him? So the managers probably would have some kind of, I don't know if they thought he was crazy or some type of negativity about him in that case. So nevertheless, and when we talk about the element of logos and how Will talked about his skills and how skillful he was in his work, and how he would bring, by him being so skillful, he would bring value to their company. He talked about all this, and excuse me, and he used a combination of these elements to actually persuade these guys to actually hire him. And I'm not sure if Will knew he was using ethos and pathos and logos when he was presenting this persuasive speech, but he was using elements of persuasive speaking, and he was able to actually persuade the managers to hire him. So in this lesson, we're also going to be doing a guided practice, and in that guided practice, we're actually going to listen to a speech by Martin Luther King Jr., I Have a Dream. And I'm sure you probably have heard this speech at some time or another, but it's a great speech. Martin used some of these same elements to draw his audience in, to try to persuade them to a nonviolent society. And we know that Martin was effective in certain ways. In some ways, we know that this was effective to some measures in our society. However, we know that we still have a long way to go in this aspect of our society, and we have to keep fighting and dreaming the dream that Martin had. And again, we'll pull these elements out of this speech. We'll listen to a couple of minutes of Martin's speech and see if we can decipher and if we can pull these elements from that speech to see if we can see how he used ethos to create credibility to his audience, of his self-credibility, of his self. We can see if he used pathos, and we just talked about pathos being an emotional appeal, and I think that is probably one of the areas that Martin probably used the most, because it was a very emotional speech that I think that particular element probably drew the audience in more than any of the other elements. Another level or another area that we'll talk about, for our formative assessment, we'll use an exit ticket activity. I'm going to give you two options. I'll give you a question, and you'll respond back to that question. I'll give you two options. The first option is, what is one thing that you learned about persuasive speaking today? So you can respond to that. Give me just one thing. If you want to do two, that's fine, but at least one thing that you learned today about persuasive speaking. The other option you'll have is, which technique or element do you find most challenging? Maybe one of those you didn't quite understand as good as you did the other one. So just kind of respond to either one of those that you'd like to. Again, just to wrap things up, we talked about our topic for today was the art of persuasive speaking, and we talked about our objective was understanding the elements of persuasive speaking. We talked about ethos, we talked about pathos and logos, and how ethos created credibility, and we just use our personal experiences to create credibility for our audience. We talked about pathos and emotional appeal, and we'll find out how much more that kind of plays in Martin's speech. And we also talked about logos, the logical appeal, and how we can use logical situations. Again, Will came in with paint all over himself, and he was still able to create a speech that was able to persuade these managers to hire him. So I want to leave you not necessarily with a homework assignment. It's not anything that you have to write, but I do want you to think about this, our essential question. And it says, how can we use ethos, pathos, and logos to persuade and influence an audience? So let's get started and jump into our lesson and see how far we can get today. Thank you.